Jack o' the Lantern. Jack had bright red hair and a head shaped like a melon. His grin was more contagious than a long, wet sneeze. When he laughed, it could be heard all the way from the school to the market square. He was one of the friendliest, well-liked boys in the village, except Jack liked to play practical jokes. Jack's favorite trick was to dress up like a ghost, then pop out behind a corner and yell, "Boo!" I'm sure you all know that pranks of that sort often end up being cruel. But Jack didn't mean to be mean. He just liked playing tricks more than he liked being liked. He didn't want to be a bully, so his victims were usually people bigger and meaner than he was, or anyone who took themselves a little too seriously. When the mayor was dressed up and was preparing to give a speech, Jack told him there was something on his face. The mayor felt around his head and demanded to know what was there. Jack grinned and yelled, "Why, it's an enormous nose!" Then ran away before the mayor could rap him on the side of his head with a mayoral staff. Besides his impish sense of humor, Jack had a mighty appetite. When his family's kitchen cupboard was bare, Jack would go door to door begging for snacks and treats. Those who had a little extra but were unwilling to share would sometimes end up with a bucket of water dumped on their head, or find a tadpole swimming in their cup. Even though Jack was always hungry, he grew into a tall teenager. He was so tall that when a group of soldiers marched into his village, they left with Jack, along with many of the older boys. A few days later, the boys found themselves fighting in the bloody battle of Bowling Green. Until then, Jack had always thought of himself as brave. He loved listening to scary stories told by the fire about giants, spirits, or monsters, but the war was more horrifying than anything Jack had ever imagined. After months of fighting, peace came at last. With just enough twice-baked biscuits for his trip, Jack began walking the long way back home. Late in the evening, as an exhausted Jack was just about to stop and eat his last few biscuits, he came across 3 beggars. The first was a young man, about Jack's age, dressed in rags. The second was an old man with long white hair and a beard. The third was a mysterious figure seated on a rock. He wore a cloak that hid his face in shadow. All 3 were huddled around a small fire, along with a large gourd with a glowing candle inside of it. The young monk crossed himself and asked Jack if he could spare something to eat. Jack gave each man a biscuit, with only one remaining for himself. Although the biscuits were dry and hard, they never tasted better. As the sun began to set, a wild pheasant loudly crowed nearby. The old monk stood and chanted, "Zickety-zack, get into my sack." Jack's vision blurred. Had he just seen the pheasant magically appear in the beggar's old flour sack? After sharing a satisfying pheasant dinner, the young monk turned to Jack and asked, "Tell me, brother, of what have you need? We will help you." Jack could see the 3 men were poor, but wondered aloud if any had such a thing as a pack of cards to pass the rest of the evening. The beggar, cloaked in shadow, reached into his raggedy robe and pulled out a fine deck of cards. With the light of the fire, the gourd lantern and the hunter's moon, Jack and the men played old games like 5 Fingers and Whizzy Whizzy Wee well into the night. Jack grew tired and could barely keep his eyes open. As he began to drift asleep, he thought he heard one of the monks say, "Take these, and when you play, you'll always win against any scoundrels who may play against you." When Jack awoke, he found his new companions were gone. He had been sleeping with the old sack folded like a pillow, and the gourd lantern and deck of cards were close at hand. He gathered them up and continued on his way. Soon he came to the bank of a river. He drank a little, then sat down and noticed 3 wild geese swimming nearby. Jack thought, if only I could catch them, then remembered the sack the old beggar had left for him. He opened it and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Hey, you geese! Zickety-zack, get into my sack!" No sooner had he uttered those words than the geese were flopping inside the bag. Jack tied it up, slung it on his shoulder, and went on down the road. After more walking, Jack reached a town with a fine tower upon a hill. He found an alehouse, entered, and told the keeper, "If you take this goose and cook it for my supper, I will give you another goose for your pains, and a third to buy drinks all around." So there Jack sat, like some fancy lord, feasting on roast goose among the grateful customers. He leaned back and looked out the window. The tower on the hill stood empty with broken windows. Jack asked, "What is that place, and why has it been abandoned?" "It's good enough to be a palace," said the alehouse keeper. "It was built years ago by a pirate that, some say, sold his soul to the devil. When he died, no one else could live in it because of—" The keeper leaned in and lowered his voice. "Some unholy power that haunts the place." A farmer seated nearby told Jack, "For 7 years it's been standing empty. A few brave or foolish men tried to spend a night in the place, but they never returned. On midnights when the moon is high and bright, some have heard shouting and screaming." A shepherd sat down and grasped Jack's hand. "I've been to the tower, once. I dared not enter, and only spied through the broken glass. I saw great shadows of demons carousing and drinking, doing all the other deviltries that came into their heads. There's no going near that place for decent folk." Jack rose and announced, "Since I have no place to stay, I'll spend the night in that haunted tower." Jack had played enough tricks of his own to know when townspeople were playing a prank on a gullible newcomer. After being a soldier for a year, a single night in an old tower wouldn't scare him. Before leaving, Jack put a sliver of wood into the fireplace and used it to light the candle in his gourd lantern. It was the 3rd night of the hunter's moon, which looked like a giant pumpkin in the sky. So climbing up the hill and entering the tower were not difficult. Jack looked inside and saw there was still a long table and chairs in the main room, but otherwise the tower seemed empty. As it was growing late, Jack stretched out beneath the table and began to doze as midnight approached. Without any warning, the fireplace whooshed and began blazing. Jack awoke to a blast of blowing horns, scraping fiddles, and every other kind of instrument. Jack struggled to his feet and looked in disbelief. Was he dreaming? There was yelling and shouting as a horde of little demons came leaping through the windows and into the main hall. Making themselves at home, they scurried about, dancing and stamping to the wild music. One of the demons noticed him and began yelling,
"Ha! A forgotten soldier! Let us have some sport with this fine fellow."
Others joined in.
"Welcome! Come play with us! Play with us! Play with us!"
"Right you are," said Jack, now wide awake. "It just so happens that I have a deck of cards that we can use."
"Deal them out! Play!
Shouted the devils as they elbowed each other and crowded round. So Jack seated himself at the table, shuffled the deck, then began the first hand. The first game was over quickly, and Jack had won. Jack suggested that the next game should be played for a few coins. The devils happily agreed. Yet after that game, their luck remained the same, with Jack raking in their gold coins. More demons sat and played, but this time they cheated. Yet still they could not win. Another game, another winning hand for Jack. The demons had been murmuring to themselves, saying they should stop playing cards and eat the soldier. But each little devil desperately wanted to be the one who won, so they kept playing. Jack continued to win all the money and stacked it in an enormous pile. One little demon could take no more and shrieked,
"Smash him, brothers! Eat him! Eat him!"
Others laughed and began moving closer around the table. The demons were ready to pounce, but one shouted,
Wait! Let grandfather deal with him."
The demons parted, and in strolled the devil himself. So a new game commenced, Jack versus the devil. Jack shuffled and dealt the cards quickly. The devil picked up his cards and smiled.
"Where did you come across such an unusual deck?"
he asked. "They were a gift." The devil's grin grew larger.
"I have no interest in winning back the gold you cheated from my minions. Let's play for higher stakes. If you win, you will become so wealthy you won't need to gamble, since you'll own the gambling house. You'll live in a fantastic castle decorated in gold. Your name will be seen at the top of fine inns and fantastic shops. It will be on the tip of everyone's tongue, far and wide. You will be the most powerful man on earth. You shall have a beautiful wife, and another wife, and then another. Of course, if I win,"
continued the devil,
"I will take your soul."
Jack had heard enough. He grabbed the magic sack and commanded, "Zickety-zack! Devils, get in my sack!" There was a blast of air as all the demons faded away and were squeezed into the sack, followed by the devil himself, snarling and glaring as he shrank into the sack. Jack quickly pulled it tight, then tied the sack shut. The demons whined and wailed as Jack swung them around and around, then let the sack drop to the floor. Plop! "Shall we continue our fun, little devils?" asked Jack. "Or is it time for you to go back where you belong?"
"Have mercy, soldier!"
"Let us out and we'll never bother you again,"
the devil's muffled voices cried. Jack called out, "And what of you, big devil? Will you swear never to do me harm, to never take me to hell? Or shall we pay a visit to the blacksmiths for more sport?" There was a low rumbling, Then the devil agreed. Just to be certain, Jack waited until daylight, then carried the sack to the front of the village church. He untied the front and gave a swift kick to the back of the sack. A blur of demons shot out and plunged into the earth, never to return to the village again. Soon after his encounter with Jack, the devil realized that people are too busy chasing after what they shouldn't have. So, there was no need to try and trick them into selling their souls when most folks would give it to him anyway. Jack stayed in the village and took ownership of the tower, since everyone there thought the place was cursed and wanted nothing to do with it. Jack had won enough gold coins from the demons to live happily ever after, which he did, mostly. He just couldn't give up his need for mischief and excitement. He continued being neither really good nor bad, so when he died, he found himself standing at the gates of hell with his 3 magical gifts, the cards, the sack, and the lantern. Before Jack had a chance to knock, a demon wailed,
"Not you again! Go away! You are not welcome here!"
Jack thought of the things he had done in the war, the mean tricks he had played, the people he had disappointed all his life. He shrugged and said, "This is where I belong." Jack heard laughing and was given a fright when the devil suddenly appeared alongside him. "I will not break my promise to you, soldier. You cannot enter," said the devil. "But here is something to help you along the way, far, far away." And that old devil tossed a burning cinder directly into Jack's lantern. For 2 nights, Jack's spirit roamed the world with only his glowing lantern to guide him. The burning light never faded, but on the 3rd night, it led Jack on a new path. Jack was shocked to discover that it had guided him to the pearly gates of heaven. He was astonished to see a familiar face. The angel on the other side of the gate was the same old man who had left him the magic sack so long ago. Jack pleaded, "Saint Peter, will you open the gate so I may at last rest?" Saint Peter sadly shook his head.
"The gates will not open for you. You may not directly enter heaven, Jack."
Jack felt crushed. He would be forever doomed to wander alone. But he was also puzzled. What did the saint mean by not directly entering heaven? The trickster inside Jack had an inspiration. He placed his cards and lantern in the sack and then pushed it through the gates and said, "Zickety-zack, Jack, get in the sack." And just like that, Jack had entered heaven. But once a year, Jack roams the earth to make amends for his past misdeeds, watching out for people celebrating the harvest on the evening of All Hallows Day. From that day to this, he has been called Jack o' the Lantern.